for all those that are viewing, welcome to Adaptability and Progression, which is going to be an hour's chat with some ex-servicemen that have come through the system. And I've got, obviously, myself. My name is Peter Spink, and I'm a director with Space to Talk. I've got Stuart Ireland from Networkology, and Rod Stevenson, who is from a council up in Cumbria, and Mark Leake from Amazon UK. So the idea of this discussion is just to go through, where we've come with adaptability and progression since leaving the services. And I'll ask you some questions and just go to you guys, and we'll take it from there, really. Is everybody happy, or do you want to introduce yourself to the audience one by one, just to let them know a little bit about your military background? If we start with, let's see, on top of my list, Stuart, can you have a little 2 secs about you?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm Stuart Ireland. I served just under 24 years in Royal Signals from 87 to 1990. Moved out, successfully crafted myself a path, and then I work for a company called Networkology. We do data comms, we do networking, and we do performance management. So that's just a quick snapshot, but I'm sure you'll get to know me throughout the course of the event.
Super. Over to Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mark Leake. I'm basically started off as a pads brat. I was born and bred in the armed forces, educated in the armed forces, and I joined the reservists, the 1st Battalion Wessex Regiment as a mortarman, and then I transferred from there to the Queen's as a gunner. I've lived in Germany, Canada, America. I turned back to the UK in 2010, and I got back with the regiment after 22 years, and they brought me back into the military family again.
Oh, excellent. And last but not least, we'll go to Mr. Stevenson.
Yeah. Hello, guys. Rod Stevenson. My military career was short and sweet, really. It's the only thing I ever wanted to do. Joined up in 88, came out in 93. For various reasons. Wish I did, wish I didn't. I don't know, but yeah, and since then I've operated my own company about 20 years. Sold that about 6-7 years ago as a going concern, and just do odd jobs in that now, really. But I'm still kind of actively involved in the military, and my old service friends, and such as Pete, and who he works with. I actually served with Pete's colleague, so yeah, I still like being involved with it. So never let go,
Still
really.
Connected, never let go, never let go. So International Men's Day is 23rd of November, as you may or may not know. So the reason for doing this little chat is something that the Ned will just add on to onto that day, and most will be send it out and once they've edited it and send it through. But let's little talk about adaptability and the transition into civilian life. I know when I did 23 years in the RAF, so I didn't dig in. I just walked in, unlike I found many other places in the wild. What I found was difficult, and I felt that when I actually left the gates of the last RAF base I was on, handed my ID card and walked away, I felt completely and totally out of my depth. After being in for 24 years and coming out, I found that I couldn't, So how did, let's ask Mark, how did you feel when you left the services?
It was relatively easy for me, to be honest. I think the difficult part was being an army brat, because all I knew was garrisons, all I knew was the armed forces and everything else. And coming back to the UK, because Dad was deployed a lot, Mum was also serving. So we were deployed a lot away across the world, in Brunei, Hong Kong, Singapore, predominantly Germany and stuff like that. Come back to the UK, and it was, you cling on to that armed forces side of things. So I joined the reservists, and to just keep that connection with the armed forces and an environment that I was used to from birth. And letting go of that was hard. When I eventually did leave the reservists, I moved to Germany to work for the Royal Army Veterinary Corps as a civvy dog handler over there. So I was still holding on to that armed forces, but more of a civilian aspect. And it must have taken, I left in 91, and I left Germany in 2008 is when I actually let go of the cords of the armed forces, because I moved to America to work for a charity. Then I moved to Canada for 2 years and then come back. And that's when I literally let go of the cord of and degreened myself, as I call it, of the armed forces. But on returning here, I saw all the disgruntledness between the military community with the government and the support they were getting, and were introduced back into the people that I served with, into the guys and everything. So I started up a thing called the Kirkby and Ashfield Armed Forces and Veterans Breakfast Club. So then I started getting back into it again. I got back into that environment again, but in a complete different aspect. Yeah, where I was hoping for support and everything else. Now I am giving support, because I know the difficulties of that transition period, getting back into civilian life, not just as a reservist, but as a pads brat. I've seen the difficulties my father did. My father did what he did short of 26, 27 years, because he just kept on extending because he was very good at what he did. And the transition him and my mum had coming back into civilian life was, again, from 3 different perspectives. My dad who served, my mum who served but was more civilian and in the UK, and myself as a reservist, and the difficulty it was. So trying to tackle that isolation and that loneliness and try and give them a different perspective in civilian life and that transition a little bit easier by giving them somewhere to go to get that fix of a military environment, but being able to go back into civvy street with a little bit of I'm all right, I can get this, I can do this.
I see. What about you? Because you had a short sort of brief career in the militaries in the paras, so 3-4 years was it? And then how did you find your transition? Because I think the people that have been in longer find it harder to let go of those ribbons and move on than those on, let's say, a short term. That's why I can never understand why they have short-term commissions for officers, because they come in and then they're there for 4 years and then they're gone, and they never seem to get their feet under the table.
Yeah, I see that to a point, but I think you should also remember about the young lads that join at 16, boy soldiers, and they serve through to 21, 22. That's a short commission, but they come out. I was at a charity over in the northeast last year sometime. It's set up by a 22-year man who done it all himself, and he's providing support for young servicemen who have come out of the army, married couples, young wives, and they basically have no idea how to function in life. And he's teaching them to cook and to do the finances and stuff that they seem to be failed on when they left the army. So just a bit of a qualifier there on your short-term thing. But personally, I was 22 when I joined, so I was a bit older. I was a bit more streetwise. Although I always wanted to join up. I went to join it when I was 18, as soon as I left sixth form, but stuff happened and I was 22. And so when I came out in my late 20s, I went back to the little village I was from. And I integrated pretty seamlessly, really. The boys that I'd grown up with were sort of there. Was never out of work. Found myself a little house in the town, finances. I had money, I paid my rent. And it was for personally, it was fine. I've spoken to 3 or 4 colleagues, servicemen that I know that I served with since you asked me to come on this, just out of interest, really, see if they had anything to share. And the one of them's a 22-year man, and his leaving was quite positive. It's quite a balanced view. And I've got one from a guy served short term in the RAF who is properly damaged. He really is. Him and his family are struggling massively. So there's definitely a contrast throughout the range.
Yeah. So what about yourself?
Yeah, so I think just going back before I left, you're afforded, and again, as we evolve, as the armed forces evolved, there was a thing called career transition workshop and career transition partnership and all those sorts of things. And for me personally, you start thinking about a couple of years before you leave, what am I going to do? I was fortunate enough my last 2 years, I served with the reserve. So I was an SPSI there. And it afforded me a sort of a general progression into Civvy Street, because you could see where these guys were. They come from all walks of life. And as we all know, when you're in the forces, you're sort of wrapped in a comfort blanket. And I think it goes back to what, Rod was saying about people and their perception of what you do in the military and what Civvy Street are like are two completely different things, because you are afforded, and it's almost like you're told, do as I say, not do as I do, and it's that, I think it's that mentality because of a hierarchical structure. But coming back to what we were talking about, the career transition workshop, career transition partnership, I think was a tick box exercise, and I don't think it's unfair to say that, because it was still in its infancy, and I think it's a lot better now. But it was the umbrella that the forces held up to say, look, we've given you some sort of resettlement, we're affording you that opportunity to give you that graduate progression back into Civvy Street. When I actually came to the end of my time, as it because it snowballs quite quickly once you start looking at the downhill path. I was a little bit unsure of what I was going to do. Still didn't know what I was going to do when I left the army. And I was going through a breakup as well at the time. So the two things, it was just, and having kids and everything like that. And I found myself really in a quandary and as to what to do. And I thought it was one of those, you either get hold of yourself, compose yourself, and take it day by day and see what happens, or you can just fall apart. And you do see it, guys have fallen apart, because they just don't know what to do. But I was like, I had a family to support, I had my kids support, and I thought, it's not just all about me. And I ended up finding a job through the reserves, and I was fortunate enough to pick up a job as soon as I left the military. But what I didn't cope with was the accommodation side of things very well, because we're very much supported in the military, or we were supported in the military, and coming out and finding the difference between what you pay for services accommodation and what the reality is, especially settling in Windsor, was a massive shell shock. And I was sort of homeless for the first 3 or 4 months, just living on sofas and things like that, because I just didn't know what to do, where to be, etc. But again, as I say, composed myself, found myself, got a job, which didn't go very well to start off with, because I wasn't used to the civvy mentality as opposed to the military mentality. It was a bit of a challenge, because things you can say within a military environment you can't say in Civvy Street, and I found that out very, very quickly. And I can see Mark's work, and you can all correlate to that. But what I did was I realized that you just need to get on with things. You can either go one or two ways. You can either go down or you can go upwards. And it has been peaks and troughs. I'm not going to lie. I've been in work and out of work over my time. I've been out nearly 13 years now. But answering your question, it's been a difficult path. It's not, roads paved with gold and things like that. Some people adapt to it better than others, but it has been a struggle. But I'm in a really good place now. It's taken time. And also it's one of those where, as everybody said, you can't let go of that military side of your life, because I joined at 16. I came out when I was 40. That's all I knew from leaving school, and it's really, really difficult. I wasn't a PADS brat, but my granddad was in the paras in World War II. And I knew nothing else. My son's joined since, and he even says to me now, Dad, I can see why you were whatever sometimes, because that's the way the military treats you. You're part of a big machine. You're part of something that is there to form a function, or to perform a function, and you are just one little cog in the massive machine. Whether you're an expendable asset at the end of the day. And I think when you get your head around that, and you actually look at what there is out in Civvy Street as well, you actually put things in perspective and realise there is life after the army, however difficult it is. But some people are more successful than others.
Yeah, that cog thing you were talking about, is it within the armed forces, you're allocated a position within that cog, where in Civvy Street, you've got to find your own.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's that finding it of your own that people struggle with. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. And just going back to what you said there, Stu, on Sunday I was stood at Horse Guards Parade, thousands of people, all with berets on, all there for the same reason. We were going to go and stand on Whitehall, do our 2-minute silence, and then we're going to march around and then go down the pub because that's what we do in the military, you know, regardless, you can never get away from that. Whether you have a Coke or whether you have something alcoholic, but you can never get away with that. And I remember looking around, and this lady who was stood next to me, who was a civilian, who was just one of the caterers, she said to me, how are you going to get all those men through that little gap? Because at the moment they look completely and totally unorganized. And I said, there'll be one man, and he'll come out and he'll shout very loudly, and all of a sudden you'll see 2,000 to 3,000 people line up in rows of 6 and go through there and know exactly what they're doing. I saw her after, and she went, I want some of that magic. She said, because when people are queuing at my catering van to get their bacon sandwiches and whatever, they're fighting like hell. She said, but that man came out, which was obviously the RSM, he shouted his bits and pieces out, and everybody just got into their rank file, walked through the archway, turn left, turn right, whatever, stood there, came back. She said, but as soon as you walked back on and you were told to sort of stand down, she said, you then went back into civilian mode. And she said it was really weird to see. But bevers came up, cigarettes came out, drinks came out, whatever. And she said, I wish I could bottle that. And I said, yeah, that's that connection that we all seem to have. We know when to switch it on and we know when to switch it off. And I think that adaptability to civilian life is sometimes, you know, going back to what you said, Mark, it's very difficult sometimes to where do you find yourself in that situation? I came out after 23, 24 years, and it took me 20 years, 25 years to actually, you know, stop the connection and then go back and then go, where am I going here? Am I, you know, do I need to go back? But you slowly get drawn back into it's like a magnet. You can't, you know, you find a lead and off you go. And I know working with WOD, and I work with WOD all through the summer on wellness and wellbeing courses we've run. We always drop back down to, you know, the civilians that we take in theory, and we're all civilians together. They asked me after, what language were you and WOD talking? Because you were talking in a different language, because we just drop into our, you know, and it's really nice. What about the navigation of what I call the new world? You know, how have you found that navigation process, well, other adaptability into civilian life? How have you managed to navigate through, you know, getting doctor's appointments, sorting out your mortgages, finding out your insurance and things like that? Rod, how have you managed? Is that come easy to you or difficult?
Yeah, it's fairly easy, really. I didn't have much, if any, support really off my parents. I just got on with it. I mean, I'm not a daft lad. I just knuckled down and worked it out, really. I got married. It wasn't long after I came out I got married, and me and the wife just muddled through. We were sort of involved in businesses, and that wasn't too bad. But I can relate to the notes from one of my colleagues, which incidentally, like, absolutely mirrors what Stuart was saying before about housing and adaptability and that kind of thing. And he identified the 3 challenges was housing, gaining suitable employment, and adapting to a civilian environment. And he's written that adapting to that environment was the hardest one of those 3. I mean, the only thing I remember about sort of working with an organisation when I came out was that I kind of set a precedent that was too high for the guys I was working with. I was just switched on and getting to the goal and making sure it happened. And if it hadn't happened, you admitted to, you stopped till it did happen, and helping each other. And everybody I sort of really realised that I was reneging everybody, and they were all kind of standing back, thinking, what is he on? You know what I mean? And I was just working as I would have done in the military, and I kind of alienated them. And I sort of stood back, and then luckily I realised before it was too late that I was alienating my work colleagues. And then I basically had to step back a bit and just kind of work.
Yeah, I think that adjustment. Really. I think that adjustment, and sometimes that I made the same mistake. I went to Egypt when I left the Air Force, and I thought, because I was a senior manager, when I said jump, they would all jump. And when I said jump, they just looked to me and went, we're not jumping. And I found that very difficult to accept. So, you know, do you think then going back to that, what you said, what, because you're in a shorter time than the people that are in a longer time, do you think the people, from your perspective, or maybe I might ask Mark this, do you think people that say do a longer period of time find it harder as a natural situation? Or Stuart, because you did 23 years, do you think it's because we do 23 years, we get so used to that lifestyle where, no disrespect, Wad, you do short term, but then again, you're out within 5-6 years and you hadn't sort of been away from the civilian life as long as somebody that had, say, done 20 years?
Mark, I'll let you go first if you
Oh,
want.
cheers,
and then,
mate. Thanks. I was hoping you were going to go first.
I'm not bothered. It's that military. No, you first. No, you first.
No,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Again, so, yeah.
I think it's again on that support network you get when you leave, and nowadays it's a lot easier with the transition side of things because they get told they have to go on these things. A lot of the different age groups as well, depending on when they served in the 80s, 90s and stuff like that, the environment in the military is a lot different. You were so reliant on the armed forces to pay your bills, to pay this. It was taking out your wages. Everything was done for you in a way, and the money that you had left in the bank was yours to go down the pub and do what you ever wanted with. And as a single accommodation, that was brilliant. Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. But a lot of these guys that are coming out that I seem to struggle most are so reliant on the spouse. They rely on the wife to pay the bills for them, to do this for them, that they relied solely on them. And I've recently experienced this in August. I've been my wife left me, and I was solely and utterly reliant on her to pay the bills, to do shopping, to do everything for me that I had done for me when I was a child and within the armed forces. Now I've had to learn really, really quickly. Sat at the car park at Aldi, and I used to get panic attacks, literally panic attacks. I'll be in there, heavy breathing, not knowing what I could buy, how much I could spend, how I could do this, that, and the other. I had people looking at me completely weird because I was doing my breathing exercises to calm myself down. And I do feel that the longer the service is, the more of a struggle it is with that transition side of things. The shorter the service will depend on the character, really. Rod's obviously very, very, very strong character. He's done his short service, but Rod, did you go back to where you were as a child? Did you went back to that environment where you had friends and family around you?
Yeah, I did eventually. I stopped down south for 6-8 months, jobbed about a bit down there, but I came back up home. Yeah. But
is that more because it was comfortable?
Maybe women, possibly. If I'm honest, yeah, probably that. But the intensity of the service, I don't think you need to be in that long for the almost like the brainwashing of the military service to affect you. I mean, I came out of there quite institutionalized in that short service. And my brother was in the Royal Marines. He joined at 16. He came out. He had a short service as well. But he was at 16. He was properly brainwashed when he came out. He would join up in 86. Came out in the early 90s, similar time to me. But I remember him coming home on leave, and he was a complete nutter. He was absolutely young lad. That's all he knew. Royal Marines, and for that short service, it took him. I don't think. To be honest, I don't think he's ever been right since. He's still a bit wayward, to be honest.
With the boot neck, so that's standard, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think just adding to that from my perspective as well. Yeah, from my perspective, I think going back to what you were saying, from an early age, when you join the army, you don't have money as such. When you're going through training, you go through you get paper aid, and it was like literally you get 15 quid a week or whatever it is. So that element, it's almost like the controlling your finances and things like that from an early age. And like you said, progressing, I got married quite early. I went to the first Gulf War and then came back from that. And my ex-wife, she was in the forces as well. But again, as I say, it's one of those where there's a lot of reliance on spouses, certainly. And I think it's one of those because they are the mainstay when you're away on tour. And when you're away on tour or on operations or whatever, it's not real life. you're away, you know, you're with your mates, you're in a group of people. Yeah, real life's going on in the background, but I think, you know, when you come back, there's always and again, as the forces have evolved, they've realised that these decompression periods, as they call them, were necessary for the guys who've been away, whatever environment, because they're almost like they're coming back to family life. They're coming back to the reality and the humdrum of things going on. Yes, you go to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, but your wife or your spouse has been there and done everything in the background. All you've known is whatever's happened while you've been on tour. And I think, you know, with regards to what you were saying about the adaptability and finding your feet when you come out from a financial perspective, I was quite fortunate in that I wasn't stupid. I had been stupid with money when I was in the military because I put my kids through boarding school, and that cost me an arm and a leg, and I got into debt. But I quickly realised that if you don't get out of debt, it's just a never-ending spiral, and you never seem to get out of it. So I managed to get myself out of it, and I came out of the military, and I was in the black, you know, for want of a better term. But it was, as I say, I couldn't get my head around why it was 700 quid a month for a 1-bedroom flat when I was used to, you know, my last 2 years, I was actually being paid to live in accommodation because there was no accommodation in the barracks for us, and because of the nature of the job. So I almost went from, you know, from one extreme to the next, which I found very, very difficult. And finding things like doctors, stability, things like that, dentists, you know, where you could just go to the dentist in the military. All right, they wouldn't necessarily do a great deal, but it was a tick box exercise again. If you went to the med centre, they give you Brufen and Tubigrip. You know, that seemed to solve everything. You know, that was their one-stop shop type thing. But then I also, just going on to what Mark was saying about moving around, when I came out, I found it very difficult to be in a static environment for too long. Because I was in the Corps, you moved as a single unit, not as a body of men. And again, as you say, you know, I'm still reverting back to those militarisms, you know, moving as a body of men. And I found that if I stayed in one place too long, I got bored. I wanted to move because I was naturally used to that 3 or 4 years, or even 2 years, wanting to do something fresh. And then you have to start all over again, looking for accommodation, looking for a doctor's, looking for a dentist, getting the stability within a job, etc., etc. So it's an evolving circle. But as I say, now I've got that stability. I don't have the desire at the moment to be moving anywhere else in the short term, although we are looking to move house next year. But it is difficult. And I think the Army have probably realised that, and that's why they've looked at giving people longer term stints in locations within barracks, etc., because they realise that people can't put roots down, and it affects family life, like kids' education, you know, and wives and spouses finding jobs, etc. Because when the Army say move, you move. You know, and that was the nature of the job. And then you have to do all that again. Even within the military environment, you have to do that. You have to get new doctors, a new dentist, blah, 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 and all these sorts of things. So it's not just relating to civil life. It was still going on within the military life, because you just expected to get on with it and do it, but still perform your job.
Yeah. So wrapping up the adaptability part of the discussion today, and we're looking going forward, and we're looking at progression. Just before we leave adaptability, individually, what would you say was your biggest challenge in that adaptability? For me, it was the acceptance of the civilian world accepting me as a civilian, I suppose, after I walked away. You know, walking into that dentist's and going, oh, hello. And given, I remember doing it, I was in Nottingham when I came out, and I gave the lady at the reception my last 3, because she said, what's your name? And I went 645 Spink, and she just looked at me and went, sorry, you know, who are you? I went, you know, and she said, oh, sorry, you know, I've just come out of the Air Force, and that's how I worked, you know, that's just the way I was. So, gents, you know, yeah, for me, it was acceptance within the civilian environment of me being a civvy, being, you know, being called a mister. That was very difficult for me to accept. I'll leave you to go first, or whoever wants to. Matt?
I think it was finding my place within civilian life. It was totally alien to me, absolutely alien. Like I say, born and bred in garrisons, brought up around the world. You knew the med centre, you knew the youth clubs and all the rest of it. But when you got into civilian life as a youth, to fit in with these people, it was like they were speaking a different language to you. And it was learning that and being able to adapt to that. And I think where was we? I think we were in Tidworth at the time, and I joined the 1st Battalion Wessex in Andover. And I think that was the first time I actually made friends with a civilian, because he was serving still with the TA, with the reservists and everything else at Andover, and he invited me to Andover. And then I realised he had no connection with the armed forces, but the 1st Battalion Wessex Regiment. And he took me out and took me to the clubs, took me to this, that, and the other. And I was like, well, this ain't too bad, but there's still that language barrier. There's still that, that tongue-in-cheek sense of humour that, they'll gasp at, and the rest of us would just laugh at. And I think that was, finding my place was really, really difficult.
So,
yeah, I echo that sentiment. And I think, going back to what Mark said earlier about the panic attacks, when I got my first civvy job, I actually remember driving up to the car park where I got my first job, and I sat in the car and I went, I can't do this. I can't do this, because I was going in. I'd already been in and met the team that I was going to work with, but it's a whistle-stop tour and everything seems rosy, blah, blah, blah. But when it actually comes down to it and going in and stepping out of that comfort blanket, you get excited because you're embarking on something new. But I think it was the actual fear of the unknown as well, and going in and realizing they didn't have the same sense of humor. But also, I think one of the biggest things was the camaraderie as well, because everybody had your back. In the military, everybody's got your back, right? You can be out with your mates in town or whatever. And I'm not saying you're looking for a fight, but you're there. And if something happens, because you may get picked on as a group of squaddies, you're certainly quickly identified. But it was also that acceptance of, I'm in the big wide world now, and as you said earlier, Pete, you have to make it's that realization of making your own way. And it was one of those where, it was, and again, going back to the friend side of things, even now, I don't have civvy mates necessarily that I can just ring up and go, do you fancy coming for a pint? Because I don't feel comfortable with that. But every year we have a Gulf War reunion that I only missed it the one year, and that was the year I met my missus. But I can pick the phone up and it's like I've never left the room. I meet my mates to come in, and you can almost be like year on year, where you can walk out of the room at the end of the function or the get together, come back in, and it's like you've just gone to the loo and come back, because you know where to pick up, because you're all thinking the same, you're all cut from the same cloth. And I think that's it, where you go into a civvy environment, you don't know what people are thinking of you, how they're going to take to you, how they're going to adapt. And the other thing, looking at jobs, is how do you articulate yourself in a non-military way to get across your experience and things like that, because all we knew was what we knew in the military. But nowadays you have to assimilate that to a civvy equivalent. And it's, yes, you've got the skill set. We were seniors in the military, or whatever rank you were in the military, but how you adapt that and how you get somebody to understand what your experience is was very difficult as well. But as I say, they were the challenges that I found, other than, as I say, how much is it for rent? Not a chance, because that was just money that I could have gone to the pub with. Not necessarily a massive drinker, but you look at other things that you could spend it on, cars, watches, or whatever. And then suddenly I'm having to spend 700 quid plus council tax, plus gas, plus electric, food, and all those sorts of things. And you look at your wages and you go, most of my money's gone on just having a roof over my head.
Yeah.
So, these are the challenges. And I think that's where guys, certainly, sorry, coming up for breath there, you look at the unfortunate, but the unfortunate guys that don't handle it very well, that find themselves homeless, just probably can't adapt to and go, I've lived in a comfort blanket for the last 20 years, and this is where I find myself, living under a bridge. And it upsets me massively, because they just need an arm around them and say, guys, come on, pick yourself up, get on with it. If I can do it, you can do it. Because we've all got strong mentality. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in the military in the first place.
No, you're right, and I think that giving up is something that I see quite a lot within the role that I do. Going around, and I see that quite a lot. And when I talk to those individuals that are living under bridges or in tents in parks, etc., normally, ironically, I can turn around and go, "That's ex-military from about 200 yards away," and they go, "How do you know that?" I said, "Because look at the state of the tent. The tent's hanging properly. The boots are outside, and everything else." What about you regarding summary of what you found the biggest challenge as you left?
Well, I think I'll just follow Stuart every time, because he says everything as it should be, and I'll definitely
there you go then.
I'll just echo a lot of that. But I'm thinking, like, the army preparing a military person for civilian life, I don't think it really can. It's a very difficult, kind of intangible thing to do. But I think it's up to the individuals, or the strength of character of the individuals, and some lads struggle with it more than others, rather than the situation. I'm sure there's components of the situation and the character and leads to positive or negative experiences, but I think it's very difficult for the army to do that. And like, I mean, the housing thing, I think that is a tangible, something that the army could help more with. And again, it's down to the individuals. Some lads do struggle with that, and again, it breaks my heart to see homeless military guys sleeping under a bridge. And if there's anything we take from that, then that is an area where I would feel we could use help, or them certain individuals could.
Yeah,
they shouldn't be reverted to that, and it's down to personal circumstances and their inability to cope and stuff, which is sad.
Yeah. So leaving the adaptability discussion around and going on to the progression and the structured environment. I mean, I know within the Air Force we had 2 years resettlement program, and we had a multitude of programs to do. And what I found was a little bit what you were saying, Mark, was earlier on, was I was given a course. It was a tick box thing. So I went and did a foundation course for an MBA in business studies. Now, did I really want to go on a foundation course for MBA? No, it was the only one that would take me away for a couple of months, all paid by the government, away from the wife, because I was going through a divorce at the time. It was great. I could have a bit of an admin break. But nobody ever, when I came back, nobody actually said to me, "Oh, how did you enjoy that?" You know, they never sat me down and questioned it. Do you think with progression now, anybody that is going to watch this this interview later on, after it's been edited, do you think those people that are in a position should actually start thinking about how they can react with those individuals going out of the Air Force, or the military? So when they are leaving and they come back after their resettlement program, should they be sat down and something should be asked of them? So, or be in before that point, not the 2-year point, maybe at 6-year point, or whatever point it is. You know, for me at 2 years before, I was told, "Oh, you're leaving the Air Force, we're not signing you on anymore," etc. Like, go on a resettlement course. And it was like, "Oh, okay, here's a list, choose one of those. And if you don't like it, tough, because you've got to choose one on the list, off you go." But nobody ever at the end said to me, "How was the course? Did you enjoy it? Did you get anything from it? Where are you going?" A bit like when we were children, we were taken into the job fair at school, and we would sit in front of them, "What do you want to be?" And then you'd go and see the recruiting sergeant, or you'd go and see the teacher, or you'd go and see the blacksmith, or whatever. So what are your thoughts, Chance, on that process?
who would you like to go first?
Who goes? Go.
Again, yeah. If you don't mind, and I don't want to be hogging the floor or anything like that. Please don't think I am. But the career transition workshop, career transition partnership, whatever they want to call it, I've always questioned is it fit for purpose? Because as you say, and again, what Rod says, you know, how can you turn somebody from effectively, and again, it's across all 3 services, but you're ultimately part of a force, a fighting machine, you know, whatever. How do you turn somebody who's got that mentality, who's driven by what they're told day to day, to then become a civilian in a completely alien environment that you've got no concept of really, other than when you go home at night, but you're still part of the military, you can be called upon 24/7 to do a job. It's only when the umbilical cord is cut and you're away from it, it's a case of, I've got to stand on my own 2 feet now. How do they set you up for that? And I think you're right. You know, what you said, Pete, is you go and they go, there you go, pick a course, go and do it. You don't know really what you want to do unless you have that, like you say, that focused vision of what you're going to do. But how far in advance do you have to start planning that? Because things change. We don't know from one day to the next. It could be a constraint within your own environment that takes you down a certain path. But going on from that, the actual courses themselves, they need to, whether they do now or not, but the validation period is, I think, is paramount from a military perspective and from a civilian perspective, to see if it gives that cross pollination, because most of the people that conduct these courses are within the forces environment. they will bring in the civilian counterparts, you know, from a resettlement perspective, but it is military driven. And I don't know now because I haven't sat in one for you know, since I left. But I would hope that it's more civilian based with civilian you know, contractors or whatever you want to call them, personnel that are running these, because they're the ones who are in tune with the day-to-day reality of what's going on. The military run courses were specifically there because they were run by the military and it was fit for purpose for the military. But actually validating them to see that they are fit for purpose moving into an environment that you've got no real understanding of, or other than just, as I say, you know, you're in and out of it. Maybe when you're on leave, but I think the validation piece is quite right what you say, Pete. It needs to be closely monitored and not paid lip service to, because it's almost like you said, I can't remember who said it, but the day you leave, you left. You were a number. Now you're a statistic, you know. And realistically, that's the end of your military life. It's all right having the British Legion and others, SAFA and people like that there in the background that can help you afterwards. But as far as your military time's gone, that's it. It's done. You're out of that comfort blanket, really, and you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You either sink or swim.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rod, I don't want to go to you again. I'll come back to you in a minute too. Well, Rod, what do your views? What, you know, did you have a resettlement program because of, you know, in your time, if you can remember back?
Yeah, it was short and sweet. I think I got an HGV out of it. It was only got a choice of 4 low-level things at my short service level. I think it's the lads like yourselves that have done in a long time that get the resettlement, you know, the resettlement courses to go on for 2 or 3 months.
So do you think that's right then to do that? Because why should, just because a serviceman has done 4 years or 5 years, have a different list of opportunities compared to someone who's done 23 years?
Yeah.
Because we're exactly the same. We were both, you know, we're both serving. We're all serving for, you know, supporting the government and doing what we're doing and prepared to die for the government. So why shouldn't our resettlement program be identical to everybody?
That's a fair point, and I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest. But they never checked up on it. You got to, you know, away you went. You know, like I said before, you are one minute you're in, next minute you're out. Again, my colleague here, he said he got an honours degree. He started studying before he got out, and he said he had Army provided learning credits for him, and he said the courses that he did were relevant to Civvy Street, and he felt that he was reasonably well supported on his way out of the military. So that's just another
horses for courses, isn't it? Well,
Yeah.
what about yourself?
Being a reservist, you don't really get it. I did get a German lesson course when I left the Royal Veterinary Corps. That was 2 weeks and absolutely terrible. But I do want to highlight that Amazon, I've got a close connection with the MOD and with the resettlement courses and everything else of making that transition into civilian life and into a job now. And there are programs out there for service leavers to connect with Amazon via predominantly LinkedIn. And they do make that transition, because Amazon, look at Amazon. When I joined Amazon, I did not want to join Amazon. I really did not want to work for this big, massive corporate company. But this company changed my mind, changed my perspective of them and everything else. And the amount of support that they give service leavers of all nations, not just of England and the UK, of all nations, is second to none. Absolute second to none. They know the skill set that the armed forces have and can transition that into coming into Amazon is amazing work. And the support that they get from, we've got affinity groups. We've got about 14, 15 affinity groups. And one of them is called Warriors. And with that Warriors aspect is we mentor service leavers when they come in. They get all the courses, they do everything depending on what department they're going to work in. And then they come in with that support group of every FC. So every different warehouse has got an affinity group of Warriors in it. So if there's any issues, if there's any mental health issues, any issues with their managers, any issues with their career choice, any issues in their private life that we can adapt to and make it a little bit easier for them, it's there. They've just got to ask for it.
But you stole my thunder, Mark. They stole my thunder.
Because sorry about that.
No, I had heard about Amazon, and I had heard how good you know, they were looking after their servicemen as such, or their retired service, MOD, whatever. And a friend of mine is ex-army, who is now quite senior in Amazon, and he was, to use the term, posted to Australia. You know, he moved from Worksop to Australia, and he's doing really well for himself. And he you know, I speak to him frequently over the net, and he told me how even down there is a culture within his own organisation down there within Amazon in Sydney, that there, if you're military, there is this group of people that looking within, you know, supporting each other within, and they're not done in the way the British Legion or WAFA or all the other ones do it, which there seems to be, again, if those organisations are watching it, you know, it seems to be rank led, but you're civilian. So we don't really need a major leading something. You know, the corporal has got the same skills, and I find that quite. I think it's quite wrong of them to adopt that. You know.
Yeah, I was a reservist. I was a private. Come in, come out. I was a tier 1, as they call it. So it's just a box standard employee. And because of the support and they heard about what I did outside of Amazon, they made me the lead of this, because they knew they wanted to learn of my experience of supporting the military community in Civilian Street, and they wanted that into Amazon. Amazon love learning. They do something called a deep dive. They have the 5 whys. They want to get to the root cause of everything to see how they can improve something for individuals or a whole group. It's amazing. It blew my mind. And I adapt that 5 whys to the support that we give outside of Amazon and within Amazon. So we'll get to a root cause of somebody's mental health, of their career choice, finances, and everything. But if you leave one FC in one country, like your colleague did and went to Australia, it's as if you walked into one door and walked into another, and it's the same door.
I must
got the same support globally.
There are other shopping businesses around as well, apart from Amazon, in case anybody, you know, just to clarify that, you know, Tesco's, etc., just in case somebody, you know, wants to have a little pop at us, because, you know, we're putting our head above the pedestal here. You said earlier on, Stuart, a little bit about the language. You know, the language, I think, is really important, that civilian companies need to learn about how to deal with military people, because it's the other way around, isn't it? You know, I think that the ex-MOD serviceman goes into the civilian company, and we're like, oh, you know, we stand out a little bit, don't we? You know, because our terminology, and we don't understand their terminology. I know from my level now, I deal with quite senior directors and people at the BBC and everything, and sometimes I just have to sort of go, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you just tell me in layman terms? Because I need to understand that. That's not because I'm stupid, because I have a degree, but I just don't get it. So, you know, the language, I think, is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, as I say, I think it's that, how do you articulate and how do you put you know, things across in such a way? Because you know, like you say, when we were in our normal environment, we just revert back. Like when I go to my reunion, we just go back, because it's always been, we laugh in the face of adversity, because it's a way of overcoming certain stresses and strains that come with a job, you know, certainly when we were in. But you can't necessarily do that in Civvy Street. And I think trying to get that across to people, that you have a different sort of mentality, a different sense of humour, not always too different. And you know, even now, my sense of humour is probably still in the military sense of humour, more so than a civvy. And again, I'm not saying civvies don't get it, but they probably just didn't get the way that we operated when we were in the military, and it does carry forward. You know, I've still got that. And as I say, looking at how we interact with our civilian counterparts is, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's different. It's different. And again, in the same way as Mark was talking about Amazon, and again, this isn't about me being on my soapbox for our business, but we have our own internal process. We have our own internal program, NetVets, and we heavily look at how we can take people that are going through career transition workshop, and before that, who have maybe got an interest, and we will engage with them, we'll talk to them, and we'll see what they want to do, you know, what their interests are. But we also we pay for the training and things like that as well. So it's, again, you know, it's another mechanism, maybe not as in depth as Amazon, it'd be fair to say, because we're a smaller company, but we certainly have that affinity, you know, from an armed forces covenant perspective and things like that. And you're seeing that more so now across the I would say across the whole ecosystem. Companies have become more adept to what military or veterans or whatever, you know, whatever you've done, and irrespective of time, they've got a program now, or they've got that in through a military program that has realized and recognized the skill set and the adaptability and the professionalism that veterans, or you know, whoever within that, as I say, that ecosystem can bring to the party, because it's necessary, because they bring a special and a different skill set. I firmly believe that. They bring, you know, reliability, they bring discipline, they bring bearing, and all these sorts of good things that we learn in the military. We can carry them across, and I think the civilian, as I say, the civilian ecosystem can learn a lot from these guys, because they've given a lot, and realistically, at the end of the day, don't expect a lot. They just expect to be given a chance and to flourish alongside their civilian counterparts. And I think that's, you know, again, as I say, it breaks down that barriers. It breaks down that barrier. If you can do that and you can respect that and understand it, I think it will make it easier.
Yeah. Well, what about yourself? Because you know, I know where you are in Cumbria. You are in quite a more isolated area than us down south, because you know, just because of the geographical location that you're in. And running your own business, and did you find that you were more not selective, but when somebody said applied to your logistics company and they were ex-military, you sort of went, oh, I can trust him to do this, compared to a civilian? And I'm not knocking the civilians at all, but I'm just wondering, for you, were you going to go, oh yeah, I want to speak to that bloke because, or that woman, because I know they come from a trained environment and they might be relevant to the position?
You're muted, mate.
Are you muted?
Sorry, yeah, the dog was bloody barking there. I had various levels of staff throughout when I had my business, 10 to 20 people in there. And if there's a military person came along, I would definitely be viewing to employ them. If we're looking for employees, somebody came along as military, they would definitely be top choice.
Because you recognise that skill set they've
got.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it's as much the attitude as the skill set, and the willingness and the problem solving, resourcefulness, all them sort of skill sets are what the military give you. But adapting into that environment, I think it's a compromise from us as military, and the civilian environment, like Amazon we're obviously doing, but they need to. It would be helpful if they understood where we're coming from. Like Stuart said, it's our sense of humour. It tends to be black, sarcasm. You're taking the mick, which a lot of people could maybe find offensive, but it's just normal to us. Punctuality, we all like to be punctual, and it's quite annoying when a lot of civilians are often not punctual, and we have high expectations. And I found that out myself when I started into Civvy Street. So personally, I think we need to compromise. We need to compromise, and the awareness of likes of Amazon are giving their work colleagues is definitely the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to change it a little bit for the last 5 minutes, just to wrap up about how we look at how to survive with really in the transition once we've got into civilian life. And for those that know what I do within the wellbeing and wellness organisation I run now, I find that wellness and well-being with military people, ex-servicemen and ex-service females, etc., all those. Once we find out, because there's that sort of nod, they come into the our reception area and on our walks or whatever, and as soon as we recognise that they've got a slight little grain of military in them, because they've got a what's the name tool on the boat, or they've got something about them, a little badge somewhere, and you go, oh yeah, well, then you start a conversation. We use wellness and well-being like our walks and talks and all the other activities we do, and we find that the military retired environment that we go into tend to be more acceptable to that, and tend to, you know, want to go on the side of the hill and walk, and want to join. So do you think well-being and wellness should be part of that resettlement program? Amazon? I'm sorry, Mark, because I know what Amazon do. That was a lead.
Mr. Amazon now. Oh my
That was a
God.
lead.
I'll talk to Jeff. So I want a pay rise on Mr. Amazon.
Just briefly, because we're running out of time. But
yeah, no,
yeah.
I think that everything that we used to hate when we served, we seem to enjoy now when we're out. We do a thing called veteran tabs, and we get the veterans out in that green environment. Green is very good for your mental health. Getting out in the four walls is good for your mental health. Getting out in the fresh air, getting with a fellow veteran and talking that military banter, airing, having that sense of humor, being able to talk out loud of something that you can't do in civilian life is key. It's having that valve, release of that valve, of all that pressure that you're holding on that you can't say within civilian life that you can in a military environment. It's a key element. And doing that outside, there's nothing better than walking in the beautiful British countryside, or Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland, wherever you're looking. Get out in that countryside, get there with a fellow veteran and rant, let it out.
Yeah, it sounds like a normal weekend I have with Rod, actually, when I'm in Cumbria. So, you know, they talk for hours. Quick one for you, Rod. What would you summarise that?
What was that, sorry?
What would you summarise, you know, well-being? Well, you know.
Yeah, massively important. I think it's a whole new kind of worms you're opening up there, and we could talk for hours on that subject. There's a lot of damaged people out there. Well-being and getting out in the open space is definitely beneficial, but there's a lot of guys out there need more than that. They need some of them are struggling.
Stu?
Yeah, absolutely. Just echoing that. I think it's good to, you know, it's that phrase, it's good to talk. You know, a lot of us have things that we've kept to ourselves, and we keep to ourselves for a reason. But when we're in our own environment, I think if you say things to your ex-squaddy mates or whatever, easier than you do to civilian counterparts, because they don't have an understanding of what you've been through, where you've come from, and, you know, and some of the stuff that you've actually had to endure. I go to the gym. And there's a couple of people there that, you know, they're ex-military and things like that. And I speak to them in a slightly different way, because, you know, you can. But I think it's important getting out, open space, go for a run, go for a walk, you know, go and stand in the middle of your garden and scream if you have to. It's important that you express yourself. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's easier to speak to our own environment, I would firmly believe, than it is for somebody. And I'm not picking on the, you know, the civvy side of things, but I think the understanding of what we've all been through from one way or another is easier for somebody who's been through the same challenges than somebody who hasn't.
Fantastic. Wow, gentlemen, I think we're almost out of time, actually. But remember that, you know, 23rd of November is the International Men's Day. I would imagine that's maybe when this will go out with him. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your time. It's been, you know, nice to meet you, and you know, and to chat about the adaptability and progression, and the journey that we've been on, but also, and I hope that anybody that does watch this interview that we've done will take on board some of the stuff that we've spoken about, and maybe use that in their way that they deal with the resettlement program for all 3 services, 5 services, whatever, you know. So thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the day, and I hope you all have a nice November and a very, very enjoyable Christmas. And in true military terms, I hope the spirits of Christmas are with you.
That's great. Thank you.
So
great to meet you all.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Speak
Take care.
soon.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.